A 5-pound bag of all-purpose flour costs $3 at any grocery store in America. That bag produces 8 standard loaves of bread. A quarter-ounce packet of active dry yeast costs 25 cents and makes 3 loaves. A 26-ounce cylinder of salt costs $1 and lasts a household 2 years. Do the math. Flour for 1 loaf, 37 cents. Yeast for 1 loaf, 8 cents. Salt for 1 loaf, less than a penny. Water is free. The total cost of a single homemade loaf of bread, using the exact 4-ingredient recipe that American households baked every week for 200 years, is approximately 45 cents when made with commercial yeast. Using a sourdough starter kept alive with scrap flour, the cost drops to 12 cents. The same loaf, wrapped in plastic, sitting on a grocery store shelf, currently costs between $4 and $6.50. That is a 10-to-1 markup on bread that you did not watch anyone bake. That contains between 15 and 30 ingredients instead of 4, and that will develop mold in 8 days. Before 1945, no American family had ever purchased a loaf of bread from a factory. Bread was baked, at home, every Tuesday and every Friday, by every mother in every state, using the same 4 ingredients that had been sitting in every pantry since the country existed. Then, in the span of a single generation, a handful of corporations convinced the American public that the simplest food in human history was too complicated to make. The American commercial bread and bakery products industry generates $25 billion a year. Globally, the commercial bread market exceeds $400 billion. Bimbo Bakeries USA, the American subsidiary of the Mexican multinational that owns Sara Lee, Entenmann's, Thomas, Arnold, and Oro-Wheat, collects over $10 billion in annual United States revenue. That is one holding company, selling bread. The average American household spends between $300 and $500 every year on bread alone. That includes sandwich loaves, dinner rolls, hamburger buns, hot dog buns, bagels, English muffins, tortillas, pita, and pre-made dough. Most American kitchens contain between 3 and 7 different commercial bread products at any given moment, purchased, consumed, discarded, and repurchased on a weekly cycle. Over a 10-year period, the average household sends $3,000 to $5,000 to the commercial bread industry. Over a 30-year mortgage, the length of time most families live in one home, that number approaches $15,000. $15,000 spent on a product that any human being has been capable of making at home for 10,000 years. Solving a problem that was already solved for pennies per loaf, using 4 ingredients that never expire and never require a coupon. The 12-cent loaf has no plastic bag, no twist tie, no printed expiration date, no preservative cocktail, no shelf placement fee, no loyalty program. No limited edition cinnamon swirl seasonal variant. It has flour, it has water, it has salt, it has yeast, it is bread. It has always been bread. The reason you do not already bake your own is not because the recipe is difficult. The recipe fits on the back of an index card. It is because a $25 billion industry cannot exist if you own an oven and 10 minutes. Every dollar you spend on a plastic-wrapped loaf is a dollar extracted from a problem your great-grandmother solved for 12 cents every Tuesday of her life. The entire business model depends on one thing, that you believe bread is hard. It is not. In 1933, at the lowest point of the Great Depression, the average American family earned $827 a year. There was no money for factory bread, and there did not need to be. Every household in America baked its own. A 50-pound sack of flour cost $1.20 and fed a family of 6 for a month. Yeast was either kept alive as a sourdough starter in a crock on the counter or purchased for 3 cents a cake. Bread was not a product. Bread was a Tuesday afternoon. This was not hardship. This was competence. Then came the post-war consumer boom. Between 1946 and 1960, American advertising tripled in size. Supermarkets replaced neighborhood grocers. And the commercial bread industry saw an opportunity that would permanently restructure the American kitchen. In 1928, Otto Rohwedder's bread slicing machine had already been installed at the Chillicothe Baking Company in Missouri. By the late 1930s, sliced bread was available in most American cities. But it was considered a convenience, not a replacement. Then, in 1941, Wonder Bread began a national advertising campaign built around a single claim. That commercial white bread enriched with synthetic vitamins was nutritionally superior to homemade bread. The slogan was, "Wonder Bread builds strong bodies 8 ways." The claim was not tested against real homemade bread. It was tested against white flour bread with the germ and bran stripped out and nothing added back. When the government mandated flour enrichment in 1942 as a wartime nutrition measure, the commercial bread industry successfully positioned themselves as the solution to a problem they had created. They had removed the nutrients during refining. They added some back. Then they told American women that their homemade bread was less healthy than a factory product. By 1950, sliced commercial white bread had captured over 80% of the American bread market. The rest followed within a decade. A generation of women who had watched their mothers knead dough twice a week now believed that baking bread required professional training, specialized equipment, and ingredients they did not have. The knowledge was not outlawed. It was simply reframed as obsolete by an industry spending tens of millions of dollars a year to convince every housewife in America that her own hands were not good enough. The United States Department of Agriculture conducted nutritional comparisons of commercial enriched white bread against traditional home-baked whole wheat bread. The homemade bread tested higher in fiber, protein, iron, magnesium, and B vitamins. The commercial loaf tested higher in sodium, sugar, and preservatives. The study was published. It was never referenced in a single commercial bread advertisement, then or since not banned outright. Just never mentioned again in any home economics textbook written after 1962. Never referenced in any grocery flyer printed after 1965. Never included in any product comparison the American consumer was ever allowed to see. The recipe has 4 ingredients. All 4 are available at any grocery store in America for a combined total of less than $5, which will produce 8 to 10 loaves. Here is exactly what each ingredient does, how it works, and how to make the loaf from start to finish. Ingredient 1. Flour. A 5-pound bag of all-purpose flour costs $3. That bag produces 8 standard 1.5-pound loaves. King Arthur, Pillsbury, Gold Medal, and every generic store brand work identically for basic bread. Bread flour with higher protein content works slightly better but is not required. Flour is ground wheat. It contains 2 proteins, gliadin and glutenin, that when mixed with water form gluten. Gluten is an elastic protein network that traps the gas produced by yeast. That trapped gas is what makes bread rise and creates the interior crumb. This chemistry has been understood, by practice if not by name, since the Egyptians discovered it accidentally around 1500 BC. For 1 loaf, you need 3½ cups of flour. That is approximately 420 grams by weight if you own a kitchen scale. You do not need to own a kitchen scale. Asterisk. Ingredient 2. Water. Water is free. You need 1¼ cups of warm water per loaf. Warm meaning between 100 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the temperature of water that feels comfortably warm to the inside of your wrist. Not hot. Hot water kills yeast. Ingredient 3. Yeast. Asterisk. A 3-pack strip of 1/4-ounce packets of active dry yeast costs between $1 and $2. Each packet makes 1 loaf. That is 8 to 25 cents per loaf. Alternatively, you can keep a sourdough starter in a jar on your counter. A starter is wild yeast and lactic acid bacteria captured from the air and fed with flour and water. Once established, a starter provides leavening for 0 ongoing cost, forever. Your great-grandmother kept one on the back of her stove. So did her mother. So did every American woman for 200 years. For 1 loaf with commercial yeast, you need 2¼ teaspoons. That is the entire contents of 1 standard packet. Asterisk. Ingredient 4. Salt. A 26-ounce cylinder of table salt costs between $1 and $1.50 and lasts a household 2 years. Per loaf, you need 1½ teaspoons. That works out to roughly 1/3 of 1 cent. Salt serves 2 purposes. It controls the yeast, slowing the fermentation so the bread develops flavor instead of rising too fast. And it strengthens the gluten network. Bread without salt is possible, but tastes flat and has a weak structure. Asterisk. Now the method. Step 1. Combine the warm water and the yeast in a large mixing bowl. Stir once. Wait 5 minutes. The surface should develop a foam. If it does not foam, your yeast is dead and the loaf will not rise. This is the only way to fail, and it fails before you have wasted any flour. Step 2. Add the flour and salt. Stir with a wooden spoon until the mixture forms a rough, shaggy dough. The dough will not be smooth. It will look wrong. That is correct. Step 3. Turn the dough out onto a clean counter dusted with a handful of flour. Knead for 10 minutes. Kneading is pressing the heel of your hand into the dough, folding it over, rotating it a 1/4 turn, and repeating. This develops the gluten network. After 10 minutes, the dough transforms from shaggy to smooth, elastic, and slightly tacky. When you press it with a finger, the dent should slowly spring back. Step 4. Place the dough back in the bowl. Cover with a damp cloth. Leave it in a warm spot for 1 hour. It will double in size. This is the yeast producing carbon dioxide and the gluten trapping it. Step 5. Punch the dough down. Shape it into a loaf. Place it in a standard 9 by 5 inch loaf pan, lightly greased with any fat. Oil, butter, bacon grease, it does not matter. Cover and let it rise a second time for 30 to 45 minutes. Step 6. Preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Bake the loaf for 30 to 35 minutes. The crust will turn golden brown. When you tap the bottom of the loaf after removing it from the pan, it will sound hollow. That hollow sound is how every bread baker in human history has known a loaf was done. Total active time, 20 minutes. Total elapsed time from start to cooling loaf, 2 hours and 15 minutes. Most of which is the dough rising while you do something else. Total cost, 45 cents with commercial yeast. 12 cents with a sourdough starter. A single bag of flour produces 8 loaves. The same amount of commercial bread would cost $35 to $50. You just spent $3. That is a cost reduction of over 90% for a superior product made with ingredients you can name without a single preservative, additive, or stabilizer. Remember, a standard sandwich loaf contains between 15 and 30 ingredients. Dough conditioners, mono and diglycerides, calcium propionate, sodium stearoyl lactylate, azodicarbonamide, which is banned as a food additive in the European Union and Australia, but permitted in American commercial bread. Your homemade loaf has 4. Flour, water, salt, yeast, 4 ingredients, 12 cents. Every commercial bread product in your kitchen replaced. The chemistry has not changed since the Egyptians. Wheat protein still forms gluten in water. Yeast still produces carbon dioxide. Heat still sets the structure. The loaves on the grocery store shelf do the same things. In plastic bags, with synthetic preservatives, with 30 ingredient labels, and with a $400 a year price tag. Walk into any farmhouse kitchen in Iowa in 1935, any tenement apartment in Chicago, any clapboard cabin in the hollows of eastern Kentucky, any adobe home in rural New Mexico. You would have found the same thing on the kitchen counter. A wooden board dusted with flour, a ceramic crock holding a bubbling sourdough starter, a cast iron loaf pan, a linen cloth draped over a rising mound of dough. This was not regional, it was universal. From 1607, when the first English settlers at Jamestown ground wheat and baked bread over open fires, to 1945, when factory sliced bread finally overtook home baking in national sales. 338 years of American domestic life centered on one basic weekly act. Baking bread, the women who crossed the Oregon Trail carried sourdough starters across 2,000 miles of prairie. They fed them with river water and wild flour. When their wagons broke and their oxen died, the starters survived. Some of those original starters are still alive today, maintained by descendants in California and Oregon, producing bread from yeast captured from the air in 1849. During the Great Depression, when 25% of American workers had no job and banks were failing in every county, bread still came out of every oven, twice a week, in every state. Not because these families had money. Because the technology was 4 ingredients in 2 hours and it had never required money. French bakers have made pain de campagne the same way since the Middle Ages. Italian families have baked pain casareccio in home ovens for 800 years. Egyptian households have produced flatbreads from the exact same grain, water, salt formula for 5,000 years, since the time of the pharaohs. It was the most universal domestic skill in human history. And it took exactly 1 generation of television advertising to convince Americans that the simplest food ever invented was beyond their abilities. For 12 cents a loaf, 4 ingredients, and 2 hours of mostly waiting, you can replace every plastic-wrapped loaf in your kitchen. Starting this weekend, no special equipment, no culinary training. The same 4 ingredients that fed American households for 3 centuries will feed yours tomorrow morning. The complete system, including the sourdough starter method, the whole wheat variation, the dinner roll recipe, the sandwich loaf recipe, and the weekly baking schedule your great-grandmother used, is linked in the description below. It covers bread, rolls, buns, flatbreads, and every other baked product you currently purchase. Everything a Depression-era kitchen made in one place. Tomorrow, this channel will show you the exact root cellar design American families used to replace a refrigerator, and why the appliance industry quietly erased it from home construction in 1955. Every product in your home once had a $0 version. They buried it. Now you know.